Hello, podcast listener. Phil here. I need your help. I've been producing Stageworthy for the last 7 years, and in that time, I haven't run ads or sponsorships, and while I've frequently made it possible to donate to help keep Stageworthy going, I've so far been content to swallow the cost of keeping the podcast going. Stageworthy is one of the few podcasts that interviews Canadian theatre makers, and I have managed to keep it going for 7 years, including throughout the pandemic, when a lot of Canadian theatre-related podcasts stopped producing episodes. But I've reached a breaking point, and I can't keep the podcast going by myself. I need your help to keep going. If you've enjoyed Stageworthy, benefited from it, discovered a new favorite theatre artist, this is what you can do. Please consider making a donation, either one time or on a recurring monthly basis. You'll find a link to do that in the show notes or on the website. I'm also interested in bringing in a sponsor or finding other methods of funding, so if you know of anything, let me know. It costs $135 a month just to cover the costs of the tools I use for podcast hosting, remote recording, editing, and the creation of episode images. That doesn't include the time spent booking guests, preparing for interviews, actually doing the interviews, the time spent editing, creating promo images, and keeping up with correspondence, which takes about 10 hours a week at a minimum. So if you can help, please go to the donate link in the show notes or on the website at stageworthy.ca. Thank you, and thanks for listening. I'm Phil Rickaby, and I've been a writer and performer for almost 30 years, but I've realized that I don't really know as much as I should about the theatre scene outside of my particular Toronto bubble. Now, I'm on a quest to learn as much as I can about the theatre scene across Canada. So join me as I talk with mainstream theatre creators you may have heard of and indie artists you really should know, as we find out just what it takes to be Stageworthy. Sam Chaulk is a theatre artist and comedian from Toronto. She's currently rehearsing her new show, Influence, which will have its world premiere at the One Night Only Festival on June 9th before hitting the Montreal and Winnipeg Fringe festivals. In this conversation, we talk about how her show Influence grew into bouffon from something initially more traditional, how a fascination with the way algorithms drive questionable content to viewers led to the creation of her show, her theatre origin story, and more. Here's our conversation. We should probably talk about Influenced.
Yes.
Tell me about this show of yours.
Yes. So Influenced is my first full-length bouffon show. I've been working on it since 2019, if you can believe it. Been through a lot of different iterations. And right now it is a rabbit hole cabaret of theatrical interactive content that is targeted at you. So I'm making fun of influencers, experts, conspiracy theorists, algorithms, you name it, everything from the internet I'm taking down, as well as my audience members and their internet behaviors and beliefs, et cetera, et cetera. So nothing internet-y is safe in Influence. It's going to be very fun.
So, I mean, was the show inspired by like experiences on TikTok and things like that, or was it you started working it in 2019? I feel like, at least for old people like me, TikTok exploded in 2020. But
yeah,
so
it's more TikTok-y now. Just because when TikTok exploded in 2020, is that when it was?
I feel like among
millennials started getting on TikTok in 2020.
Millennials and Gen X and everybody else, we started getting on. The Gen Z was on before that.
Right, yes.
They may say that we all ruined TikTok for them, but
yes.
For it exploded in popularity, like in the mainstream in 2020, I think, with the pandemic.
So I started working on the show actually at York University.
Okay.
So I was doing my master's in performance creation for theater at the time. And just before I started that program, I had an experience on YouTube that was the major inspiration for this. Basically, like, I was on YouTube all the time. I was watching creators like ContraPoint, for example, if you're a fan of or know ContraPoints. She's this amazing woman who at the time was doing a lot of kind of like de-radicalizing of the alt-right kind of content, and kind of getting into all these like guys on Reddit and like the incel movement and talking about all that stuff. But as it happens, when you're, going down the YouTube rabbit hole, I got recommended some really scary stuff that was also like inexplicably intriguing to me. Like, it was like alt-right content was getting recommended to me, but it was like kind of the entryway stuff. So it wasn't like the full blown, the Great Replacement theory, which is like, that white people are being replaced thing. It was like the light stuff where it's like, it's this guy, Dave Rubin. This is how they started getting to me, with like this guy, Dave Rubin, who sort of first thing he does is show you his wedding ring and says like, I'm married to a man, I'm a liberal, I'm a card carrying liberal, or I should be, but I believe that everybody should be able to speak freely about their ideas, et cetera, et cetera. So basically he says this, but then every guest that he has on his show is like alt-right or very close to that. You know what I mean? So like, I remember kind of unironically and like uncritically starting to watch some of this stuff and like hearing the things that people were saying, and kind of like I wasn't being radicalized by any means, but I was just like, some of this stuff is okay, like I remember having this experience, and this was a time when I was a bit low, like personally in life. So I was just watching a lot of YouTube. And like, I quickly realized what was happening and kind of got out of it, but it gave me this feeling of like, oh man, this is not hard to do, like it's not hard to get onto these, like get into these rabbit holes, and like people really make a big effort to try to convert anyone of any political leaning. You know what I mean? And I started to kind of have, I guess, a little bit more empathy for the people who were going that way. And there were a lot of people going that way at the time, and now we're in a different place for sure. But this was like pre-COVID, obviously. And I think that a lot of people who were sort of like getting into this stuff, like you remember, I don't know if you had like family members who would kind of start to spout this stuff and like light versions of this stuff. And like you would just see it all around you, and I could kind of see it all around me.
Yeah.
But that's like my sort of origin story for how I started work on this. So when I first started working on it, it was all sort of like I was just doing so much research into all of these different people doing this stuff. And then it started to become clear that like a lot of the common sort of like the structure of the rhetoric was really similar to like ads that I would get for like shapewear, or like or even arguments from like the left. Like it was like this, I saw this kind of common structural thing emerging from sort of everything that had just kind of been marinating in this area of the internet. And I was like, this string is the one I want to expose or look at really directly. So I started doing like performance experiments, because we were doing them almost like twice a week in this program, which is awesome. If anybody wants to make a solo show, look into that program. Like it was really incredible, honestly, even though most of it happened during the pandemic for me.
Right.
But I was doing all these performance experiments, like using that verbatim material, some really bad stuff, some less bad stuff. And then the people, my cohort and my teachers were like, bouffon, Sam, bouffon. Like, a lot of what you're doing here is really confronting and uncomfortable. But you are also this really accomplished improviser and comedian. Bouffon, think about it.
Had you been exposed to bouffon before that?
No, I was not at all. No, that was my first, that's how I heard about it. And people were pointing me to like Adam Lazarus's daughter. Like people were just saying daughter, like everything that I would do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which I have never seen, but I actually got to see his work in progress versus recently, which is super, super exciting. But yeah, so they pointed me in that direction, and then I wrote some essays on it. I was looking at Red Bastard and Poxy, and Sacha Baron Cohen also, learning about it. But I never really got the chance to actually study it while I was doing my thesis. So afterwards I did. But like the show that I ended up creating for my thesis ended up, because it was happening during the pandemic, it ended up being this wildly weird, conceptual, like very complex thing that I got on, that I got my friend to film. Like we went into the theater at York, and it's so complicated. Like it has boxes and ribbons and blood, and like it's crazy how complicated it is. But this version now is like so pulled back.
Right.
And my hope is that it kind of contains all of that work that I did, but is just very, very simple.
Was it at the time, was it so complicated because you were trying to fill video time and you didn't have like audience connection, do you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was because I had to build things into the show that, like, I had this little box friend, basically. Like I had all these Amazon boxes, and one of them was just like my buddy that I fell in love with, that was called Amy, and he was like an Amazon box. And all the things that I really wanted to be doing to the audience, I kind of started doing to him. So I had this like stand-in object to kind of, because it was always meant to be interactive, like when I started making it. And then it was just not possible to do that, even over Zoom. When I tried to make it interactive over Zoom, it was always just like total flop, fail,
Yeah.
So it's like I had to build these things in because it was lacking that audience interactive piece.
Yeah. Zoom is not great for performance, and there hasn't been a good live streaming thing that's good for performance, and Zoom just isn't it.
Well, it's like especially with clown, right? Because it's about exchanging energy between people. Yeah. It's about like there's a look that you can give someone in real life that will not translate, even if you're looking directly into a camera.
Yeah.
Because you're seeing them, you're seeing where they're at, and you're responding in real time to like exactly that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The vibe work, like just cannot be there,
I mean, that's why, like, in a lot of ways, like, the Zoom theater and things like that we had during the pandemic is a completely different animal from like live theater, because we just don't have a way to connect with the audience. And what is theater if not having a connection with your audience?
100%. And I remember during that time, like I was so mad, and I would just constantly be saying like, this isn't theater. Like we all need to accept that this isn't theater. Let's stop trying to pretend that it is, because it's not.
Yeah.
And but then there's like, everybody trying to be optimistic, and like I get that too.
Sure.
Of course, but I would just be like, no. You know what I mean? Just also being like an interactor myself, like that's not possible for me,
Yeah.
Did you start, when you started at York, was it already pandemic times? Was it like automatically like video on, or did you have some in-person time before that happened?
So I had the fall term. And the fall term was what I referenced there, where everybody was like, bouffon, daughter, like, look into that.
Right.
And yeah, I had the fall term, and then I had like a month of classes basically before everything shut down.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it was completely online. So it was like a blessing and a curse in a way, because I also got to spend so much time inside the world of my show, and and it became my coping mechanism. Like, all I thought about was this, like, all day, every day. I would wake up in the morning, and I would go to bed with it in my head at night, and I would walk around High Park and come up with things, and you know what I mean? Which I think is also why it was so like, it was so complicated and all over the place, is because I just had come up with so much stuff, you know.
And you were throwing everything at it. I mean, if you're thinking about all that, and you know, what else do you have to do during the pandemic but to think about this one thing?
Exactly.
And of course, you're going to be throwing everything in it.
Yeah. And then I thought, and like at the time, I thought that all of that would be what made it good. Like, all of that attention and all of that like constant time to it would be what made it good.
Right.
But it was not true. Like, taking away, like, I really now have the tip of an iceberg of process.
Right.
With this show. And the rest of it is underwater, and that is like perfectly fine.
Right.
Like, we were thinking about incorporating some, like, I had some stuff with like ribbons flying out of my mouth and like gradually like pulling them out and eating marshmallows and blah, 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 like all this stuff. We recently were just like, we were going to work it in, but we said, let's cut it. I'm going to focus, especially considering this is my first full-length clown show. I'm just going to focus on being with the people in the space. And that is it. I'm going to build a playground. I'm going to build a structure. It definitely has quite a bit of text. Like, it's definitely kind of hybrid. Because it's not totally, just me kind of playing games, like with a bit of structure. It's like, there's text, there's quite a bit. So it's kind of hybrid, a play and a clown show. But yeah, so I'm going to build this structure, and I'm going to play on it, and I'm going to focus on my sensitivity with the audience and responding to them honestly in the space, and get really good at that.
That's so important, though. That's like what is clown if not like just you and the audience, right? Like,
exactly. And like, I've been studying clown for years and years and years and years. Yeah. Like, I started in my BFA, actually. I did Jinko clowning with Louise Gauthier, my original clown mama, there. And then I was doing courses here and there. And that was in 2009. 2009. Oh boy. That was a long time ago. And I've been doing it with different teachers and stuff since then.
Right.
But I never really performed very much in clown. And so now that's, for the past 2 years or so, I guess that's what I'm focusing on, is like taking all of that studying that I did and actually putting the, rubber to the road on it.
Yeah. I mean, clown is, a lot of people do, like, they do clown in school, or they take clown, and it's another thing entirely to be like, I could create a show around this, because clown is frankly terrifying.
Oh boy. Is it ever?
Yeah.
Yeah. It is terrifying. But you know what? I actually find improv, I've done a lot of improv, and I find it more terrifying somehow.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I think because I feel like I have to be smart. I have this like pressure to be like a witty, but like all the best improv work that I ever did was all like character-based, emotional stuff. But then I would be in groups, and that wouldn't quite fit with what people were doing. And like it kind of became clear to me as I was doing improv that I was like a bit of a different bird there. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like, I think I've always kind of been pointed towards the clown work in all of my explorations of different ways of being a performer.
But it's kind of like, if you look at old Second City stuff, you look at, say, SCTV, for example, and you had two kinds of performers there. You had a lot of people who were very, funny with their mouths, like they said funny things, or the character was funny. And then you had other people who were so physically funny. If you compare like Eugene Levy to a Martin Short, both very hilarious people, but one is, yes, he's funny with speaking, but he's also like incredibly physically hilarious. Whereas Eugene Levy, for example, tends to be more speaky funny.
Yeah. Totally. There's different ways of being it. And I think I definitely think I'm, like I said, like a hybrid, because I'm definitely, the text in this show is definitely like turns of phrase and clever little things. And you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And actually my director, Suzanne Roberts-Smith, excellent clown performer, teacher, who's Francine Cote is her big teacher and inspiration. She we did the mock-up probably 2 weeks ago, just kind of throwing everything down at once to just see what the beast was looking like, even though it's like it was very not super finished.
Right.
And she was like, wow, you're so smart, like there's all this text. It's like, how can we essentialize all this stuff so that you can play actually? Like, so she's really training me in that direction, I suppose, to make sure that I'm not like, oh no, this thing doesn't come after this thing and blah 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 blah. Like she's really focused on making sure that I have the tools to have the freedom that I need to just kind of like toss stuff if I need to toss stuff, and dig into things that I need to dig into depending on who the audience is, right?
Yeah. I mean, this has been quite a journey with this show, Influenced. Is there something that you could pick out that's like, this is the number one thing that I've learned in working on this show?
Oh boy. I have to think about that for a second. Oh, keep it simple, stupid. Honestly. Because it's like all the time and all the energy that I put, I really learned how to do a process for myself. Like I experimented with all the different ways of giving what I was creating all of that richness. But when I was doing that, it's like I thought that was going to be the show. And it just so isn't, like, because I'm like, going in and moving and then, getting all like worked up or whatever, and then sitting down with my notebook and like drawing pictures and, having little visions or whatever. And like, like doing all of that process stuff, which is important and so good.
Yeah.
But I think it's like I expected that the things that came from that part of the process would be what the show was. But really it was just like building blocks, or it's like, how do you unearth this thing that's inside you? And like, how do you grow the roots of this plant? And maybe your plant is just like one little stalk or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And letting what shows be really simple.
Was there a moment in your process where you realized that the show was not all of these things that you did in the video version?
Yes. Well, I mean, I think when I went back to restructure it and like to pull pieces, because even in the video version, there was all these pieces that I had tossed from when I was originally working on it in 2019. And interestingly, a lot of those have come back. So I think when I was restructuring it, I was like, no, this doesn't make sense. This, this is too much, especially considering I really have my premise straight, which is like, it's a cabaret hosted by an AI MC with one bouffon performer who does bastards or characters, right? And songs and comedy bits and games and whatnot. So it's like in that structure, that premise that I've given myself, like, how am I going to do, like at first I was trying to squeeze all that stuff in, being like, how could that be like a cabaret act or whatever? And I was like, no, it just needed to be that they're cabaret acts, you know? Like, that's it. And they need to have one simple thing that I'm doing, and then that's it. And I'm excited to do it now. Like before, like I remember the feeling of rehearsing for that video version was like absolute. And it's probably also because I just had nobody around me. You know what I mean? Like we had like 3 people, no, 4, because it was me, Kate MacArthur, who is my partner in crime in Theatre Enthused in my company. And we worked together a lot, and she worked together with me on the video version and also now on this. She's the voice of Algo, the AI MC. I lost my train of thought.
That's all right.
What was I saying?
You were talking about Kate MacArthur and and people who are working with you.
Because we only had so many people in the space.
That's right. Yes.
Right. It felt terrifying, yes, and it felt like absolute looming pain, you know, because it was like so much to do, and there was just no pleasure in it whatsoever. Right? Like it was just, okay, I have to like do all this stuff that I make.
Right.
And oh my God, how am I going to make that happen? And I have to do it with nobody around, and I have to do it in tape, you know. And now, even though it's kind of like it's coming together, I've actually been working on it all day today. My brain's a little bit scrambled from it, but like now, even though it's all there, it's like coming together. But when I look at what I have to do now, I'm just like, that's going to be a blast. You know, like I'm excited to do each of these bits in the show because they all just seem like so much fun to me, which I think is like, I'm getting it right. Now I'm getting it right. You know?
Yeah. What's the relationship between like the idea of the algorithm? The algorithm rules all of us on the internet now. Whether it's TikTok Reels, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or any of that stuff. What's the relationship between the algorithm and the relationship between you and Algo and the audience?
Right. Yeah. So I think one of the main things that I really think about the way that people talk about social media, I feel like we frame it as if like we are these helpless victims of our algorithms. Often, like it's kind of like,
right.
You know what I mean? It's like, oh my God, my algorithm is doing this to me. Like my algorithm is doing that to me. Blah 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 blah. But in the show, I've decided to kind of put a bit of a spotlight on the fact that it's us abusing the technology and not necessarily the other way around, or at least I'm experimenting with that idea. Like she calls Prima, my bouffon, calls algorithm a number of unsavory names throughout the show. And like, and it's a collaboration, you know, like it's not just this is happening to me. It's like, well, you're choosing to have this happen to you. You know what I mean? Like you could be choosing something else.
Yeah.
But you know that most people, I think at this point, like know how insidious the algorithms are. You know how it looks at your face and can tell by the way that your eyes move that you like this content. Or at least it is interesting to you, whether it be disgust, hatred, whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then gives you more of that, right? So like a lot of what we're looking at in the show too is like how like that kind of like morbid curiosity. Not morbid curiosity, but it's almost like you don't even know what's happening to you.
Yeah.
You know, like you pay attention to something that you don't like, and then you just keep getting more of it. Like one time, like I'm a nanny by day, 3 days a week. Actually, all of us working on my show are caregivers, working on like the most adult show possible. There's even a baby in rehearsal, Suzanne's little baby Juju, which was like so lovely and so fun to kind of like look at him as one of my audience members. So it's hilarious. He's like 3 months old. But what was I saying? Oh dear, I keep losing my train of thought. Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I was on TikTok a bunch. And I kept getting stuff about parenting, even though I don't have any children.
Right.
And for a while I was looking at it a lot.
Right.
And then without making the connection, I was getting very like paranoid about how good of a job I was doing as a nanny.
Ooh.
Like it got in my head, man.
Yeah.
And like, I know about this, you know what I mean? Like I have done an entire 2 years at university researching this stuff.
Yeah.
But I didn't make the connection until I was on the phone with a friend of mine. And she was like, I don't know, maybe like, because I had told her about both of these things. And then she was like, well, maybe that's why you're feeling so in your head about your nannying. It's because you're getting all this stuff on TikTok. And I was like, oh. And it was feeling really gross and dark too. But that's the way TikTok is. And that's the way we're structuring the show too. It's like, it gets you with like funny, fun stuff. You love it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. It's great. And then, oh, this is a little bit gross. Oh, it's fun again. Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, this is really gross. Oh my God. And then you're on some gross stuff and then you're like, okay. And then you get a little bit up again. And then it just, then you're down the rabbit hole. So I've like structured the show to be that way. So it's like, yay. And it's also perfect because that's, how we imagine bouffon shows to be, where bouffons to kind of work with audiences is like you have the charm, you have the beauty, right? And you come out with that so that you can stay on stage, right? You don't want them to kick you off right away for being so ugly and horrible. And then once you got them, then you fuck them, So it just works out perfectly in that sense.
The algorithm is funny in that way that like, whatever you give attention, it gives you more of. Even if you are hate watching it, it doesn't care if you're hate watching it. You gave it attention. And so like there are times when I'll be like, why am I getting so angry, so anxious while I'm looking at this thing? And I start to realize, oh, all the funny stuff is gone.
Exactly.
And I'm just getting like all the stuff that it knows enrages me. So I have to do like a reset where it's just like very mindful of what I'm giving my attention to.
Exactly.
And like skip by everything else. And it's but it gets you. If you're not conscious of it, like you said, it just pulls you in it gives you more and more and more. And suddenly you are in this angry funnel that just keeps you spiraling into more and more anger.
Yep.
And feeling terrible about the world.
Yep. And it's built to be hard to recognize what's happening to you while it's happening to you, right?
Yeah.
Like, even you could be the most educated person about it in the world, but you're gonna like it knows, and it has ways around. It's wild.
Yeah.
And yeah, TikTok is the worst one. TikTok is definitely the worst. But I also love TikTok the most now. Strangely. Like I used to be a big YouTube person. I was a big YouTube person for a long time. And now I have my phases with TikTok. Like I'm a bit, since that thing with the getting in my head about childcare thing, I was like, I also started using the button, the one that's like, I don't like this or whatever. There's like a little thing you can press that's like, please don't show me more of this kind of thing.
Yes.
So I've started actually using that. But then sometimes I also like hack it to try to do research, like I'll stay longer on something that I don't really want just because I want to see. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate the social media platforms that let you click on a thing and it'll tell you why it's showing you this. And you'd be like, oh, I see this.
Yeah.
You think, like, I like the transparency when you can do that and be like, oh, I understand why you're showing me this. And now I can change it.
Yeah, totally. It's like you can look on Facebook to see your little, I forget what that's called, but it's basically a list of words that describe you or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. We also have an act in the show that's like, I'm a psychic. It's a psychic act, and I get the audience to give me their phone open on an app that they use the most, and then I give them a psychic reading based on what I see. Right. Which is very, very fun. And also very, it's like, yep, this is how much, and it's usually like at the experiments I've done with it, I can get really on point.
Right. Yeah.
With it because it knows so much about you. It's like doing all the work for a psychic, So I feel like that's going to be like a sobering experience for some people in terms of, and then also it's like something we're working with, an idea we're working with in the show is, there are things that you allow your phone to do to you that you would never let somebody do to you in real life.
No.
Like you would never let somebody like even you would never, many people would not let someone see their browser history, right? Like, and there's things,
right,
not just things that are done to you, but also things that you would never share with a real human person, but you share with your algorithm all of the time. It's like, so it's like, why are we so okay with giving so much information to these like massive, massive corporations? But then we're so sort of like isolated in our relationships to each other. And also we're so, we're not very quick to forgive people in life, but for some reason we just like let the abuse keep happening to us. So it's kind of that thing. It's like, who are you in this scenario? Like the abuser or the abused? Like you're both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times I think because, the corporation and the algorithm are faceless, literally faceless.
Yeah.
We don't, it's like, oh, I don't know this person. I don't know this thing. It's not a physical thing. Somehow I'm okay with giving it like all of the keys to all of my secret subconscious, like hates and desires and wants and loves and all this sort of stuff. But if I know who this person is, I'm not telling them any of that stuff. It's a weird thing.
No, it's a weird thing. And it makes me like, there's something of that smacks of the idea that we value the tech over humanity. You know what I mean? Like over being human in spaces with each other and like showing each other grace. And, obviously we don't want to be so vulnerable with everybody, but right. Like, you know what I mean? Like it feels weird to me. And that's part of what this is too, is like, it's like, we're sort of pushing down what makes us human for the sake of this tech.
Yeah.
And we're using this tech to make us less human somehow, because we've always been running away from being human. Right. And that is what bouffon is about, right? It's like, oh yeah, you think you're like aristocracy, you think you're so good, right? Like, watch me have sex on stage and spit at you while I do it. You know what I mean? like watch that, and like, are you happy with that? Like, do you like the fact this is what you look like when you have sex? Like, it's like I couldn't be more blessed with a form that addresses this content in a better way.
Absolutely. It's funny, that algorithm thing. I think it comes down to the algorithm never judges us, and we're always afraid that other people will judge us, The algorithm will just give you what
That's right.
what you want, and it doesn't care. It
Yeah,
doesn't judge
divine
you.
grace from the algorithm. Yeah.
I'll give you that. I'll give you more of that. Sure, I'm just gonna keep serving you that. But if
Yeah,
a
I don't
person
think you're an
you want-
asshole. Actually, I'm going to
you
give
might
you some
judge
stuff
us.
that if, okay, so you start, I'm getting the sense that maybe you start to feel like an asshole now. Actually, I'm going to give you somebody who is an unlikely person to be saying that actually you're not an asshole for thinking this. So then
Right.
it's like you get reinforced then on the thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, think what you will of South Park. But like for a while there, it was feeding me a lot of Black people who were talking about how South Park doesn't use, like, the stereotype use on South Park isn't a problem. And I was like, I don't know what to think of it because I've loved it for so long that it's like,
Right.
it's like, that's a hard one for me to let go of personally. But like
Right.
the fact that, like, I just noticed that TikTok was feeding me this stuff. You know what I mean? Being like, no, you're good. We know you love this and you're fine. Look at all these, diverse voices that are telling you that you're fine. The ones that you were worried about in the first place, they're telling you that you're fine. So you're fine. It's fine. Like,
Yeah.
it's wild how much they know.
Yeah. It sure is.
Yeah. And I heard someone say too, it's like, go on TikTok, or like people are afraid of going on TikTok because they're afraid of knowing who they really are. It's wild.
I mean, I could definitely see that because TikTok can reveal to you a lot about what you want to give your attention to.
Yes. Like so many people, there's such a huge community on TikTok who are like, I'm a lesbian because of TikTok. Like, or like, I found out that I was gay because of TikTok.
I've heard of those
I'm like,
stories for sure.
I see how that makes sense. Because that could actually be hard to figure out, like, but the algorithm figures it out for you. And then it's like, okay, here you go.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh. This is the thing that I couldn't put my finger on my whole life,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Sam, one of the things that I love to talk to people about is their theater origin stories. Everybody has a different story about what it is that drew them to the theater.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was something as a child in their teenage years. For you, what is it that first drew you to the theater and made you want to pursue it?
My little thing that I say for this is basically, as soon as I was old enough to understand that the people on TV were actors, I asked to be in acting classes. So I just asked because that's all I wanted to do. So I started acting classes when I was 6. And everything in my life when I was a child was just like, dramatic play all of the time, every day, always. So I was one of those people who just knew immediately, like out of the womb kind of thing. And then I've like explored in a lot of different directions in terms of, doing music or playwriting or comedy, different stuff. And then in high school, I was in a show choir. So I did a lot of musical theater bits, which was super fun and kind of made me come into myself as a performer at that time. And then I wanted to go to theater school. So I went to, I got my BFA at Memorial University of Newfoundland. At the time, it was called Grenfell Campus. We just called it Grenfell. Now it's like Memorial University 2. Which is like, I don't know, everybody's calling it Grenfell. Just call it Grenfell. But yeah, so I went there, did my BFA, and like there's a really awesome summer theater situation going on in Newfoundland. Like we have so much theater, Phil. It's amazing. So I started working. I started working at those festivals in 2009. That was like my first year as a working actor. The first festival I worked at was like Grand Bank Theater Festival, which was so much fun and so awesome because the artistic director at the time, Bernie Stapleton, basically would just let us do what we wanted. Like she was like, we were doing Rock and Roll Heaven. What songs do you want to sing? And I was like, I want to do Get Up Off That Thing and some Elvis. And it was so free. Like I could choose what I wanted to do. And at the time I was kind of in a songwriting kick. So she was like, do like a little lunchtime cafe and you'll sing your original songs for people and they'll come listen and have a little meal and it'll be great. So it was very like free form, that one. So that one was, I'm very grateful to that one because it was, I was just like, wow, I get to do what I want. So fun. And people were like writing sketches for like the little reviews and stuff. It was just very creatively free, that festival. And then I worked at Rising Tide Theatre Festival a bunch. 3 years I've done summers for Rising Tide. 2 when I was like around in my BFA. And then 1 I went back in 2018, which was absolutely beautiful. It's like a theater on a wharf directly on the ocean. And we would like swim on our 2 show days after doing like a historical walk around and in like the petticoats and everything. Like we'd be so hot. And then just swim in the ocean. It's very idyllic and fun. And then I was in Montreal for 3 years where I started doing improv and I studied more clown. And then when I got to Toronto, I got really hard into improv here. So I was at Bad Dog, like living at Bad Dog Theatre, the old location, Ossington Bloor, for like 4 years. And like went up, did all their classes. And we did a show called Dreamboats, which was very fun. And we did Canada's Next Top Blank, which was a musical improv show, reality TV show, that we actually took to Chicago Musical Improv Festival in 2018, which was super fun. I also got to study at Improv Olympic and also the Annoyance. And so it was like heavy improv focus for a really long time. And then I guess the master's degree, which then integrated kind of all of these pieces of me that I had previously. And now I'm this kind of spooky clown. At least for now.
No, you've been in several different places as you've been studying. What was it that made you decide that you were going to sort of settle down in Toronto for a while?
It just made sense. Like there's just so much more going on. And another thing, like with Montreal, it was kind of like, well, the Anglophone theater community is probably not too much bigger than the theater community that I'm already integrated into back home in St. John's.
Right.
So if I'm going to be somewhere that's smaller like that, it's like I might as well go back to St. John's for that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like I may still like people amaze me over there. The stuff they're doing is so great. So I was like, if I want to go and I want to discover more and see more, then Toronto has to be the place.
Yeah.
And it is like I just feel like I'm constantly discovering who I am as a creator and performer and what I'm interested in. And that's why it's hard to leave a place like Toronto, because I'm just like, I want to see everybody come through.
Sure.
You know, like I got to see Red Bastard like a month ago or a little bit longer than a month ago at Sweet Action Theatre, which was fantastic. So good to see him after having like just, had to, scrape through all of his YouTube videos and stuff. You know what I mean? Like trying to learn about it.
Try to figure out what is it actually like to see this in performance, because I can only see what's on YouTube and what people tell me.
Exactly. Like it was a hard thing to study bouffon, like without having any examples and being able to see it. So yeah, I love being exposed to everyone, And then also like some of the improv shows that I saw back in the day, man, like Combustion Festival, like some of that stuff just absolutely blew my mind, you know. It was oh man, there was this one they did that Rapid Fire does called Underscore, where they have like a DJ basically like compose a whole like 40-minute track, and then that it has kind of structure built into it, improv structure built into it. And they had the festival ensemble, so everybody from everywhere, right, do this show, and oh man, like I'll never forget. You know, it's like when you see the stuff that's good, you know it. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you also did the 6-week summer course at École Philippe Gaulier this past summer.
I sure did.
Tell me about that.
It was awesome. It was so good. I had the time of my life. I also was, you know, destroyed, but I had the time of my life. So I got funding for it from Canada Council for the Arts. And my pitch to them for going there was basically like, look, I had to do my master's during the pandemic, and I had no live performance whatsoever. And so now I feel like I'm terrified that I have all this like calcium buildup over me as a performer. And I just like don't have any trust when I'm performing live, and I'm just scared to go do it, basically. You know, this guy's going to die soon. I want to go. Please let me go. And they let me. And boy, it did exactly the things that I needed it to do. Like it really got me back in touch with like the pleasure of performance, which is really their big thing, right? But I had so many layers to chip away. And like one thing that's amazing about there, I found, was the environment that he creates in that classroom drops ego to the bottom. And it's like, when are you ever in a space like that?
No, that's for sure. That's for sure.
You know what I mean? When are you ever in a space where it's like, whoever has the biggest ego is just absolutely floundering and doing miserably? Like, and one thing I learned too is like, it's not just that overconfident ego, like that like cocky ego that is the problem. Like my ego was a huge problem too, but it was like an insecure expression of ego, because I wanted everybody to like me. I wanted everybody to think that I was good, you know? And so I was pushing like the things that I think are good about me onto other people. And it was just like, as soon as I got up there, he clocked it immediately.
Right.
And then, but he's doing this in very like sort of, I don't know, he's saying these things in very sort of like esoteric joke kind of ways, right?
Yes.
So it takes you a little bit longer to figure that out than it is for him. But like when you look back, like, oh yeah, he saw that like right away. But it took me forever to just stop pushing. Like, and I was like, wow, like this is compulsive. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, it's so hard. I remember when I was in theater school, the thing I was most afraid of was failing.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to.
Then you're trying not to fail.
Exactly.
Trying so hard.
Yeah. And it's when you're doing that, you're not going to succeed because you're not actually concentrating on the things you need to concentrate on. It was like the main thing was like, I don't want to fail. And oh wait, what am I doing? I'm kind of not doing a great job right now because I'm so worried about failing.
Exactly. And then you like I think that's something that kind of came up for me when I was doing improv, like in the later days, like before the pandemic, was like, I would often lose track of what I was doing because I was in that space. And like, I all of a sudden, that's like getting in your head, right? I all of a sudden wasn't there with the thing that I was doing. I was with myself being like, is this any good? Like, maybe I should do this. Yeah. This will be good. And like that kind of stuff. It's like, and that is, to a point, like that is ego. And like, I didn't think that way before. Like I almost saw myself as like a victim of that or something, you know, but like that, no, like, I needed to really let that go. And I was pushing like at the school. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to drop everything. Like, I'm going to stop trying it all. I'm just going to get up there and like breathe, and that's going to be it, because I just don't know what to do. And so I did that, and then I was like, I'm boring, like, and then, man, one day it was like during bouffon, I went up there. He didn't beat the drum. He was beating the drum for everybody else. This was like an individual exercise, and it was just to start them. And I just stood there, and I was like, today my strategy is to take deep breaths, right? I'm like, so terrified. And I'm just like taking my deep breath. He doesn't beat the drum, and then he's just like, "We don't love you, goodbye." Yeah, like, and I was like, I didn't even start the exercise, Phil. Like, I didn't start. And then the class was like, "Let her go," and he was like, "No, I am the teacher. I make the decision." It's like, but like when he did that, it was like it showed me like because the class was really trying to butt against him on that decision.
Yeah,
and I was like, when I do this, I'm taking myself as a performer away from my audience. My audience wants me, and by pushing or by just being terrified, I'm not giving myself to them at all, and but they want it, and they deserve to have it. You know what I mean? So like, how can I find my way around the fear? What do I need to do? And then the thing is like, when you actually then do it and succeed and have fun and play, it's always just very mysterious. So like,
right.
Like I can't be like, here's my formula. I breathe deep down into my butthole, and then I like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, that's how I do it. There's none of that really. I mean, the thing I feel that it's like pretty hard to put a finger on, but the thing that I feel like I learned to tap into the most is just that feeling of like play, like what it feels like to be enjoying playing.
Yeah.
Like I can recognize when I get into that zone and where exactly that is.
Yeah.
And that's really just the beginning, but that's something I can do now. And I even, I can recognize it when I like talk to the cat, or like to a baby, and I'm like, there it is. It's like the thing they wanted me to do, like the play, it's there. I feel it. I can feel the play. So that's like the main thing that I've gotten in touch with, I think.
The stakes are always so high when you're at school, though.
Oh boy.
Like, man, like, and it's no wonder that I was so afraid of failing, and therefore failed. I mean, because the stakes are pretty high, and it's that need to succeed, that desire to succeed, because there are so few situations where we feel like we are free to fail, right? Yeah. And school should be one of them, but we always feel like if I fail here, like they're gonna like hate me or whatever, It's so hard.
That's a structural problem. Like that's, it shouldn't be based on like assessing how well you fit a certain criteria.
Right.
Which is what I liked about the Gaulier pedagogy, right? Like it was never telling me what I did right, the via negativa, right? Because I feel like as soon as someone with an opinion tells you what's right, then you're kind of starting to create people who are the same, and people are trying to do something like somebody else did it.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you're kind of getting told what you're doing wrong, it has the effect of letting everybody be right in their own way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I really appreciated that teaching method, but it's like, you don't want to make a bunch of carbon copies of, whoever is the most accomplished teacher at the school. Right, yes. You want to let everybody be exactly who they are and find exactly who they are. And the only way you can do that is by failing and making mistakes.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh, absolutely.
There's no other way. Like it should, thinking of my nanny life. It's like that. I'm telling the children that all the time. I'm like, that's a part of it. that's a part of it. You're making a mistake. Like, you don't need to get frustrated with yourself. But when you're assessed based on correct and incorrect answers,
Mm-hmm.
and then that seeps over into creative stuff, like theater school, for example. Then you get a bunch of people who are trying to be right in all the same ways, and then boring,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So people will be able to see Influenced at the One Night Only Festival in Toronto on June 9th. You'll be at the Montreal Fringe Festival in June, and also at the Winnipeg Fringe Festival, I guess, late July?
Yes, it is. Like the last 2 weeks of July.
Perfect. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a real delight.
Yes, absolute delight, Phil. Thank you so much for having me.
This has been an episode of Stageworthy. Stageworthy is produced, hosted, and edited by Phil Rickaby. That's me. If you enjoyed this podcast and you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can leave a 5-star rating. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can also leave a review. Those reviews and ratings help new people find the show. If you want to keep up with what's going on with Stageworthy and my other projects, you can subscribe to my newsletter by going to philrickaby.com/subscribe. And remember, if you want to leave a tip, you'll find a link to the virtual tip jar in the show notes or on the website. You can find Stageworthy on Twitter and Instagram at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website with the complete archive of all episodes at stageworthy.ca. If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Phil Rickaby, and as I mentioned, my website is philrickaby.com. See you next week for another episode of Stageworthy.